Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Since we are all talking about how well Indian women have done in hockey at Tokyo Olympics, reaching the semi-final, one name that keeps coming to our minds in our discussion and which has caught our fancy right now is Vandana Kataria. Vandana Kataria is India's star striker. She was one of the deadliest strikers on display among the women's teams in Tokyo. She scored a hat-trick, the first Indian woman Olympic hat-trick against South Africa in a match that India had to win crucially to reach the semi-final. That Vandana Kataria. Now, what happened? Just on the day India lost the semi-final to Argentina, unfortunately, very close match. After taking the lead, India lost the match. That is the day a couple of young people made news or headlines for all the wrong reasons around Haridwar. Why? Because they were making a racket. Racket as in they were holding a kind of shameful celebration and dancing around Vandana Kataria's family home near Haridwar. Now, Vandana Kataria, first of all, what kind of nutcases celebrate when your country's team loses? And why do it in front of or around the house of a person who not only scored a hat-trick, scored many other goals, but also made sacrifices. You know, she rose from extreme poverty to become a national level player despite the lack of facilities. She was in the bio bubble at the training camp when her father died. So for 3 months until her father's death, she's not been able to visit her family. She couldn't visit her family when her father died because she'd rather be in the bio bubble and at the camp. But around her house, these people were making a racket and quote unquote celebrating. Now, why were they celebrating? Now, if we read the reports coming out of the area in the Times of India and some other publications, they tell you that that's because Vandana Kataria is a Dalit. These were upper caste men, and also there is a general feeling that this Indian hockey team had too many people who are either Dalit or tribals or quote unquote others. So celebrate the fact that they've lost. And how much sicker can some people get? So we are not getting into a value judgment over what they've done. That is very easy. We can easily call this a shame and outrage, etc., and ask for the strongest action to be taken against these idiots. Although Vandana's brother said later in the media that when he went to the police to complain, the police did not pay attention to his complaint. But let us leave that aside. That is not what a national interest column is all about. I have to take some panga, which means I have to wrestle or jostle with a complexity. And where there isn't one, I have to find one. So in this case, I am now using this. In fact, I'm inspired by this sad incident to walk into territory which is hazardous. And hazardous, you know why? Because see, how much criticism anybody faces then when people mention about the caste makeup of the traditional Indian cricket teams. Right? It's been changing lately. We'll talk about that. But traditionally, Indian cricket teams have been very upper caste with a lot of Brahmins. But anybody who's mentioned this, including reputed sport historians, they might have said it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but they are still being trolled for it. So I know that in India, the upper castes don't like to discuss caste. They'd rather say, what caste? It's all about merit. So this becomes so sharp sometimes, this attack and this criticism, that sometimes you become so wary of it that you don't even want to raise the obvious questions. So I can raise a couple of questions now. I'm daring to do so. That is the reason I say I'm walking into hazardous territory. One, what is it about hockey, the game of hockey, that it has always attracted the underdog in the subcontinent? For 100 years, and I will give you examples, facts and history, that minorities, so-called lower castes, indigenous communities, various ethnicities, they found hockey empowering and they found hockey a game that welcomes them and they've excelled at it. Or the other question, how come Indian cricket team, the composition of Indian cricket team used to be very elitist, until say about 20 years ago, and then slowly began to change, and after IPL it has changed dramatically. Now, why has that happened with Indian cricket? So, if I were to ask you that, isn't it true that Indian cricket's fortunes have risen? Indian cricket's dominance in the world has risen with the rise of fast bowling talent in India. Today, India has so much fast bowling talent that it can field 4 fast bowlers, as it has done right now in Nottingham at Trent Bridge, and yet be having a couple of equally good ones on the bench. How many countries in the world have that luxury? Where has this fast bowling talent come from? Needless to add, it has come from the fact that Indian cricket has become much more meritocratic. Because of IPL and need for more talent, it has reached out to far corners of the country, produced opportunity for more and more people, and that's why the team has become much stronger. So compliments to BCCI and the Indian cricket team's leadership for making it a true meritocracy, where it doesn't matter whether you paid for St. Stephen's College or Hindu College. Those used to be the nurseries in the past in the north, and I'm sure similarly there were nurseries like these in other parts of the country also. So today, because the competition is free, fair, and opportunity is available by the truckload, Indian cricket is doing so much better, and in the process it's become a lot more inclusive. Now, why is hockey such a magnet for marginalized communities? Now, we are not sociologists, so I will not talk sociology, but surely we can quote facts and history to underline the point that this is a reality. Muslims, Sikhs, Anglo-Indians, tribals from East Central India, the most impoverished parts of India, you name it, you will find that people from marginalized communities have risen to star status in Indian hockey. In fact, over the decades, it's been impossible to set up an Indian hockey team, men or women's, without a couple of tribals at least from East Central India, that is Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Odisha. It is almost impossible to build an Indian hockey team, either for men or women, without one or two, if not more, tribals from East Central India, that is Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Odisha, and also from the Northeast. And also the number of Sikhs. Captain Amrinder Singh got trolled by a lot of people for saying that 8 of the people who stood on the podium in the Indian hockey team for the bronze podium came from Punjab. He didn't say Sikhs, but we know that. In fact, over the decades, Sikhs have become synonymous with Indian hockey, even for cartoonists. I remember even Lakshman's cartoons, where he used the Sikh hockey player to denote something about Indian hockey, whether it was doing well or it was doing badly. Now, why has that happened and how has that happened? Let me first establish to you that this has happened. So, go right back to 1928. Amsterdam, India won its first Olympic gold. Who was India's captain? India's captain, if you look at official records, was a man called Jaipal Singh. Now, his full name was Jaipal Singh Munda. He was born in a very deeply impoverished family. You can imagine how poor Jharkhand was in 1920s. And from there, he rose to become the captain of India. Now, in which other sport can India claim that a tribal from the poorest part of India became the captain of India the first time it went to the Olympics? And in his wake, he built this tradition there that the tribal zones of Central India, East Central India, have always excelled at hockey. 2 marvelous training centers came up, one at Khunti in Jharkhand, one at Sundargarh in Odisha, and a lot of the players come from these. And also for some reason, again, don't ask me the sociology of this, for some reason, tribals from this zone have been very good defenders. If you look at the 2 teams that played out now, so there was Salima Tete and Deep Grace Eka in the women's team, and also there was Birendra Lakda and Amit Rohidas in the men's teams, barring Salima Tete, who is a striker, is an outside right. All remaining three are defenders. And if you think that does not establish the trend, then remember some of our doughtiest defenders of the recent past. Dilip Tirki, who later became a BJD MP. Also before that, Michael Kindo, who made the Great Wall of India along with Surjit Singh. in the 1975 World Cup that India won, the only World Cup that India has won. Now, Jaipal Singh Munda, having got the job of getting the first Olympic gold for India out of the way, got on to do other things. He became a public figure. In fact, when he was a child, he was taken under its wings by a British pastor's family. They looked after him. They also enabled him to go to England to study. So he went to Oxford. He studied there. He had the opportunity to do anything he wanted, maybe even as an Englishman or working for the empire. He could have joined the ICS, he had the option, but he chose not to do it. He captained India in the Olympics, and then he joined public life in a way. In fact, anytime we pick up our drink, whatever our preferred spirit, if we drink alcohol, I'm not recommending that you drink alcohol, but if you do, whether it's a single malt or a vodka or beer or a wine, whatever, whenever you sip it legally, lawfully, say a little thank you to Jaipal Singh Munda. Why? Because he was a member of our Constituent Assembly representing India's tribal communities. That was the heavy Gandhian environment. Everybody wanted the Constitution of India to declare permanent and compulsory prohibition all over India. The only man who stood to defend the rest of us against that onslaught was the defender of us all, Jaipal Singh Munda, who said drinking is a tradition with my tribal people. You guys don't have the power to take it away from us. Don't even try. And that's the reason he saved us from compulsory prohibition. Now, the same team had 8 Anglo-Indians, 2 Muslims, 1 Sikh. It also had a very young Dhyan Chand. Among 8 Anglo-Indians was also a colorful man called Richard Allen. Now, Richard Allen was Indian team's goalkeeper. In that Olympics, he conceded only 1 goal for the Indian team. Indian team conceded only 1 goal, and that too in the match where they defeated America by 24 goals to 1. So you might think that they were so busy scoring goals that some American got past them and scored 1 goal. But how did they get past Richard Allen? It seems that Richard Allen got so bored in the goal that he sauntered away to sign autographs on the sideline, and it was in his absence that somebody came and scored a goal. Now, I'm telling you some of these stories. You might think I'm digressing or this is trivia, but this is just to say, just to underline the fact that every sport has its folklore. Every sport has its colorful character. Every sport has a great history. It isn't just cricket. It's just a tragedy. We only talk about cricket in our country. If you see the team sheets of 1932-36 Olympics, then you will find the number of Muslims and Sikhs rising, and I'm not even going into the caste of the others where it's not been publicly slated. It was becoming quite clear that Indian hockey was attracting talent from the minorities and from small ethnicities and from marginalized groups. Partition actually delivered a heavy blow to Indian hockey because a lot of the Muslim talent went to Pakistan, and sure enough, they made Pakistan India's primary rival 1948 Olympic onwards. In fact, it was Pakistan that first denied India the gold in 1960 at Rome Olympics. Now, 60s were also a strange time. 60s was a strange time because we had a history of partition, recent wars, that for some reason Muslims were not trusted to play hockey for India because Pakistan was the main rival. As a result, many sharp Muslim talented players, particularly from Bhopal, migrated to Pakistan because in the 60s it was possible to do so. And the one Muslim who made it to the Indian team in the 60s, that is Inamur Rahman, he made the team in 1968 to Mexico, and there also he was being dropped, but Dhyan Chand, who was the coach now, said, I will not sign the selected players list unless you put Inamur Rahman there. So he was taken there but played only in 2 matches. He was not played in most of the key matches, including the semi-final. So that is a tragic story. From that, things changed so dramatically that not only did he coach India later, but India then produced a star cast of Muslim players mid-70s onwards. And meanwhile, the tribals from East Central India continued to rise as all the other communities. Now, in 1975 came the breakthrough for Indian Muslims. How did that happen? So Google the 1975 World Cup at Kuala Lumpur, the semi-final match that India played against Malaysia. In that match, India seemed down and out. There were just 5 minutes to go. 65 minutes had gone past. Hockey used to be 70 minutes then, now it's 60. Used to be 70 minutes. India were 1 goal down and Malaysia were the hosts. The crowd was with Malaysia. India was getting a lot of penalty corners, and although it had 2 great penalty corner strikers then, Surjit Singh, among the best in the world, and also Michael Kindo himself, they were not able to score for some reason. So in the 65th minute, India got yet another penalty corner, 1 goal down. That is when the coach Balbir Singh Senior, who was himself a triple gold medalist at the Olympics, he had the presence of mind to call out young Aslam Sher Khan. He was a defender, he was sitting on the bench. He was called out as a substitute just to take that penalty corner shot, just in case he might turn out to be lucky. So all of us, and if you can find that footage, please watch it. Watch him pull out his amulet from around his neck, kiss it, and then take the shot and slam in the equalizer. That equalizer took India into the extra time when Harcharan Singh scored a goal and India got into the finals. If that had not happened, India would not have won its only World Cup championship so far. Then Aslam Bhai opened the doors for Indian Muslims to Indian national hockey team. After that, we had Mohammad Shahid, we had Zafar Iqbal, people who trained India, people who captained India, people who trained India as coaches, Jalaluddin, many others came up, and this taboo was then gone, and so Indian hockey became even more inclusive. Now, I leave it to you to Google the squads of all Indian national teams, men as well as women, since 1975, and you will find this growing expression of India's diversity in India's hockey teams and small communities. Look at the Meiteis of Manipur. They are just maybe over 1 million, maybe 1.5 million people. And yet, it's been almost impossible to build an Indian men or women's hockey team without a Manipuri Meitei in it. In this team, for example, there was Neelkant Sharma. In the men's team, there was also Sushila Chanu, the defender in the women's team. Even in the past, we've had Kotajit Singh, Chingling Sena Singh, Nilkamal Singh. So these traditions get built in small communities and they excel in hockey at the same time. At the same time, how come we don't see anybody from the Northeast making it to the top in Indian cricket? It will happen. I'm not saying it will not happen. It will happen because Indian cricket earlier was quite confined to some big cities, but it's now been opening out, and it's a matter of time that you will find in Indian cricket also. It's already begun to reflect India's diversity much better than in the past, but you see it getting even better going ahead. So I know the rabble I am rousing. I know that any mention of caste, diversity, etc. triggers some people. But this is not an argument against upper castes. Upper castes have talent, but so do others. It's not as if talent is caste denominated. That's where this whole merit versus caste argument comes in. So we are challenging that argument using the example of hockey. And yes, upper castes have talent, and you can see it in every field, but a nation will prosper only when it reaches out and finds talent wherever it exists, in the farthest corners of the country and also in all strata of its society.